What's up, everybody? You're either here because you don't care about the Super Bowl or you're not sick. Those are my two assumptions right now. I'm kidding. You're here because you may not know why. And I would invite you to consider that this morning. Like, why are you here? You're here for some thought. I don't know why, but you maybe came with a friend. That's why you're here. Someone invited you. You're looking for something specific and unique in your life, and that might be found in God or in church and faith. You're here because you're serving or you're giving, or you've just been a part of this for a long time, and now you're just stuck and you can't not be a part of it. But there's a lot of reasons of why you might be here this morning, and I would just encourage you to consider that. Why are you here? And be open to maybe it being different than what you would most naturally think. This picture behind me ended up being about 40 people. Andrew told the story a moment ago when we started talking about a church plan and him being like, I don't even know what that means or what's that look like. Brian Ross was one of my first conversations there standing in the back. And over time, it became a group of people meeting in a living room right here behind this house that eventually said yes to planting a church. I can look around this room and many of you are still in this picture, and there's a lot that are in this picture that are still here, a part of Midtown. And we never imagined what this would look like. This picture was taken 5 Sundays before that thing called COVID, where we had this imagination for gathering right here at Heaton Elementary School, and then COVID happens, and all of a sudden, all these hopes and dreams and ideas are condensed down to Zoom every single Sunday, and things got pretty simple, which in so many ways I was thankful for. But for many of these people in this picture, we had an idea of why we said yes to be in that room, why to be on that team, why to do the thing in which they said they were going to do, why I was saying yes to this. And one of the things along the way over 5 years is I've been able to say that this has become much different than I ever imagined, but greater than I could have ever expected. And we say yes to things sometimes, not fully knowing why or what's to come. And I think this matters for your own life. You have things that you're trying to figure out in your life, from vocation to relationships to just your own fulfillment and purpose. And there's something that I believe that God wants to do with our yeses to things as much as he wants to do with our nos. And we don't always know why. And if we look back on this picture, I could go around this room and thank many of you just individually. I could spend too much time doing that. I would like to get us out of here before 2 o'clock. But I would also like to, the one major thank you, she's serving down in kids today, would be my wife. I think over 5 years, one of the things that her and I both said yes to church planning. We both had an idea of what that was going to look like, what it was going to look like for our family. We did not have kids yet, and then we had 2 within 10 months. And certain things happened that we did not expect. And it looked very different than how we both imagined. And my wife has just been a champion. She likes to be behind the scenes. Many people in the room will always say, wait, which one's your wife? Because she never wants to stand up here and do anything like this. But she is just faithful and consistent, and she helps ground everything that we are as a church. And we just would not exist without her in so many ways. So that's my one specific thank you, but thank you to everybody who gives and serves and prays and cares and shows up. It matters. And so whatever your why is for being here, I'm thankful for it. And I have an imagination for what will come from it. And a part of that is I do believe that there's more to come. That there's more to come here for us as a church. There's more to come for your life. And that's not just some vague idea of let's all prosper and have prosperity in our life, and that God is always doing something new and there's more and it's greater. I believe it's actually from something a little bit different, because that picture, while being celebratory 5 years ago, 6 months before that, I was sitting in a cafe in Denver, and I was with who was our national director and then a church planning person. And the person of that organization asked me, said, Ryan, what's your greatest fear about church planning? And I immediately said failure. I didn't even have to think about that. And my first thought was failure. And I look back on that now, and I wonder how many things in your life does failure, maybe the idea of it, keep you from something. And or maybe even past failures, things in which you would quantify as a failure, how that might still stick with you or show up with you in your life. And I wouldn't have thought this then, but it got broken off of me a while ago because I don't think that's a helpful motivation to not fail. So I think if we look to not fail in our lives, we will essentially take zero risks. We will do nothing creative. We will do nothing significant. We will not actually be able to participate in what God is doing in our world and in other people's lives and in our own. And as I look back on that piece right there, I think one thing that it does is it actually encapsulates what might be very common in our culture today, is that we just need to do better and try harder. That if every person could just do better and try harder, things would work well, things would be great, things would be the way they're supposed to be. And if we're not careful, this actually leaks into our life with God. That we think about God as this person who just wants us to do better and try harder. That if I could just have more faith, that if I could have less fear, that if I could stop messing up, that if I could be morally clean, that if I could get everything right, then I will start to experience more of what God has, the life in which He might be calling us to. And I would offer to you that I believe that there's more to come, not because you and I need to do better or try harder. In so many ways, I believe it's actually the opposite. That for you and I to experience a deeper life, one that brings more meaning and purpose and peace, that actually does something in our world that is positive, that other people look to or are attracted to or impacted by, it's the opposite of doing better and trying harder. Paul, he was an early church planter and leader. He contributed to much of what we call the New Testament today. A number of the scriptures that encapsulate Jesus' life, but also just the early church. So us, this kind of a thing 2,000 years ago in the East. And he writes this to a group of us in Ephesians, and also writing to you and I today in 2025. He says, for this reason that God has actually broken into your life, that you have become something new, that you're not just yourself. For this reason, ever since I heard about your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for all God's people, I have not stopped giving thanks for you. Remembering you in my prayers, I keep asking that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the glorious Father, may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that you may know Him better. So that you may know Him better. Not do better, try harder, but the things in which He wants you and I to see is so that you and I may know God better. Now, it's hard for us to undo this when we think knowledge, we think some type of information that we need to get into our brain, something to master. What he's talking about is knowing something intimately. When Mary, the mother of Jesus, was accused of having a baby, becoming pregnant, what her response was? But I've never known a man. I've never known a man. Now, we knew that she knew men. She knows what a man is, but she didn't know a man. She was never intimate with a man. Paul is writing to you and I, saying, may the spirit of wisdom and revelation be given to you so that you may know Him better. How much does that undo what you're currently up to in your life? The ways in which you're trying to improve, the ways in which you're trying to correct things or fix things. What if all that was stripped away? The busyness, the living from shame and guilt, the need to find status, for everything to go right. What if it was all stripped down and your singular focus was to know God better, to understand Him, to relate to Him on a deeper way, maybe even allowing Him to relate to you better? I thought about 1,000 stories I wanted to tell today. I thought about a number of stories in this room. And one of the things I wanted to do to kind of flesh some of this out, and then I'm going to teach a little bit more, is I wanted to actually hear from someone else, and all of us to hear from David Cuevas here in the church. So David, you can come up. Welcome David up, please. So he is said yes to this. I told him I have a few set questions that you'll have an idea of where I'm headed, but then I might ask a couple of random ones along the way. David's been a part of the church for a couple of years now, and as I've gotten to know his life and his story, I just wanted him to share some of the things in which God has interacted in his life, and we'll go from there. So I would just love for you to start with, you started coming to Midtown about 2 years ago, and would love for you just to kind of share a little bit of like, what did life look like for you at that time?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Happy 5 years. Just want to say that first. 2 to 3 years ago, I think I was living more of like a pleasure-centered life. And what I mean by that is I think I was living very expediently, like kind of just chasing like whatever like the next like fun thing was on the weekends. I used to drink and party a lot. And I always felt like there was something like missing at the end of the day. And I think during that time, you know, it was all about me. It was all about like what's best for me. It wasn't putting others on the plate, you know, serving others. And I think putting others before myself and living like that actually brought me closer to God. And yeah, I think that's how I was living back then. Yeah.
So when you say that part, like there's something that was actually bringing you closer to God, what were the things that you started to do, or what started to shift for something new with God to actually happen?
Yeah. I think it was after really like putting all of my trust and faith in God, and really like thinking about, okay, how can I like figure out like what's missing, and praying about it. And I got on my knees and I just asked God to kind of reveal himself to me. And in that moment, I felt like he did. I felt like he revealed himself to me, and he showed me like his love. Like it was like free access to love that I had been missing out this whole time. It was like I had this like all these like love letters that God was sending me and like stored in a mailbox, but I didn't even like open them up until that moment when he showed me like who he was, and that I could extend that love to people around me and serve others.
So you just did something that I think Paul had just said, and you didn't have the passage, so you couldn't have done this on purpose, but essentially he said, like, I was just trying to figure out a way to make my life better.
Yeah.
And you were working at something, but then immediately after you said, and then at some point I just got on my knees. Yeah. And I just prayed. And there was something in which you just wanted to know God that was not happening in other ways. And as you prayed and accessed through that imagery of the mailbox and the love letters, powerful. But what actually started to help increase, I guess, opening up the mailbox or receiving the letters?
Yeah, I got invited to Midtown from my friend Trevor Ford. He's watching online right now, so shout out Trevor. But in that moment of calling, I think that the space here is what actually Midtown provided the space for me to really like discover God's word and tap into that love a little bit more, and my own faith, you know. And so I'm super thankful and grateful for like the space. Yeah.
And as you did that, as you're opening up, as you're walking, as you're feeling this shift, what does it now look like going forward? How has that changed your vision for life, values, those kind of things?
Yeah, so aside from like living that like pleasure-centered life and just like really focusing on me, now I do my best to live a Christ-centered life and think about, you know, how is this like serving the Lord? And I try and look at things like from that lens. And when the moment I got on my knees that day, I committed to like not drinking anymore. So this month on the 18th, I'll be 2 years sober.
Nice, yeah. Big time. That's huge. So there's something that you're finding within that's actually changing some of the things in which you've turned to. And I guess try to find life in so many ways.
Yeah.
And what has changed as you look outwards towards, I guess, others and even just your context that surrounds you?
Yeah. I made a note before this speech to like think about like judgment and thinking about like being in spaces where it's easy to like judge others and to cast judgment. And now I try to extend the love and just practice good judgment, but treat others with just kindness and not being so quick to judge people for like how whatever space that they're in, because I know, because I was in that space. I was like partying and going to clubs and stuff and feeling like that emptiness. So now being in those situations where I can be like a catalyst for them to experience, like the free love that's out there, that's in God's word, then I want to be that for people. I pray every day that I can be just a guiding light to someone if they're experiencing some of the things that I went through. And so, just point to God, point to Christ. That's what I pray for.
We thank David for sharing his story today.
Thank you.
Again, man, I just think there's a number of things there in what you're saying, David, that are helpful for just all of us to imagine that the more in life, as you could hear him, it's not some form of increasing morality. It's not doing better and trying harder. There is a moment of surrender. There's continual surrender, to continue praying each day, to imagine the way in which his life is with others, to imagine other people in his life greater than his own. And Paul continues here. And I think what David is mentioning, what I've experienced in my own life, what I know many of you have experienced in your own life, what I want to encourage us in, is that the more to come is not because of anything new. The reality of my statement of failure as a church plant was short-sighted because we're arguably not starting anything new. We're joining with what God has been doing forever. Beyond you and I, beyond the things that you and I could turn on right now or try to do, God has been doing faithfully throughout the lives of those around us and who have come before us. And what you and I are doing are joining in something that he is already up to. Paul continues, he says, I pray the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you. The eyes of your heart. Again, your heart does not have eyes. You should see a doctor if they do. But he's saying something of knowledge here, that your heart could actually see so that it can know. Again, he's going beyond just superficial knowledge of who God is, and that in a deep felt, relational, all-knowing way, that we be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you. A part of you and I finding any form of life or anything of more to come is because you and I have a hope that we cannot find in other things. Your job will ultimately not give you hope. Your marriage, your relationships, your dating will ultimately not give you hope. Your financial status will not ultimately give you hope. You being able to fix everything in your life will continue to fall short, and you and I will continue to look for hope. It is the Christians who have noticed and recognized and accepted that there is a God who has given them a hope beyond their current circumstances. If you're looking for hope this morning, you are in the right place. If you have things that are overwhelming and sorrowful and grief-stricken, you are in the right place. And this is why Christians can actually affect the world for the better, because we can be generous with things that we have currently, knowing that there will be more that we will receive beyond this time. And that right now is not the only thing that you and I have to hold on to. That there is something greater that we have to live for. That we can actually enter into darkness and brokenness and pain because there is hope that is breaking backwards into your and I's life. Paul says to know the Lord, one of them is to then know the hope in which you have received. He says, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance. May you and I know that there is an inheritance in which you and I have been offered. God has actually offered you and I something in you and I. Notice that he is not beckoning us towards something, but he is saying, I have actually given an inheritance. My inheritance is in you. He wants to draw closer to you and I so that we can become more readily available to the things in which he has for us. Again, this is surrender. This is not trying harder and doing better. It's something that he has already given everyone else before us who have believed, and it's something that he has already given you and I, that we can have hope beyond this time. and that you and I can receive something that is beyond ourselves, that is not within our own power. Because he goes on next. He says this prayer, and that you may know, and then he says his incomparably great power for us to believe. The more to come, the things that he wants to do in your life are not because of your strength, your might, your ability, your power. You actually can't do the things in which you want to do. If you're anything like me, you've tried over and over and over again, and yet there still continues to be something missing. No matter how much you achieve X, Y, and Z, no matter how many times you fall short, there's still something that is hanging in the balance that you desire more of. And he is saying that there is a power. And look, it is the same power. There was the mighty strength that he extended when he raised Christ from the dead. You and I actually end up having something greater than what you and I can do in our own might. When we enter into our places of work, when we live and reside within our neighborhoods, when we actually move towards the poor, the marginalized, those in need, when we actually enter into darkness and pain, places that desire hope, it is not because you and I have some form of special ability. It is not because I have the right answers. It is not because I have an ability to mend anyone's life back together. It's because there is a power that you and I have been offered, that it was resurrected Christ from the dead. This is what you and I continue to hope in for more to come in and through this church. We are not starting anything new. We're not trying to muster up our own strength. We're not trying to clean up so that we can do something effective. We continue to open ourselves to a power that is not yours or mine. And I don't know about you, but that is good news, because the more that I try, it seems that things actually can get worse. When I have good ideas, they're not always the best ideas. When I see the greatest way forward, it actually ends up being a little bit short-sighted, and there's something else I wasn't prepared for. But there is something that can empower your and I's lives so that we can experience more of him, his goodness, his beauty, his peace. Paul starts to close this letter, and he talks about this in Jesus, who is now seated at his right hand in the heavenly realms. And he says that in this power, it is far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is invoked, not only in the present age, but also in the age to come. And God placed all things under his feet and appointed him to be head over everything for the church, which is the body, the fullness of him who fills everything in every way. That is good news. The government that you and I look to have hope for, he is above. The dominions and the powers that continue to reap destruction and pain in this world, he is above. When you have brokenness in your relationships, he has been set above. When you can't seem to make sense of the world in a way that is helpful for yourself or for others, he has been set above. There is one who you and I can turn towards over and over and over again, because he has been set above. We do not find our hope in our own ability to do better, to get it right, to muster up more energy, to clean ourselves up. We find it in one who has actually given you and I hope because of the power in which he resurrected Jesus from the dead. He has given to you and I so that we can be his inheritance. He wants to draw closer to you, to actually have an authentic, deep relationship where you can feel seen, where you can open a mailbox full of love letters to give you a way forward. So again, if you're in need of hope, this is why we do church. We don't show up for the sake of transaction, to go to church. You and I are the church. And we gather here to be reminded of the hope that you and I have to live by and the power which does it. The early Christians would be known by their gatherings by a secret little symbol that was the shape of a fish. You've seen it on the back of cars. I don't put it on the back of my car because I drive too fast. Intentionally don't do that. But what it was a way for people to recognize this is a safe place for Christians to gather because they were under persecution. For them to have hope. For them to hear Paul's words of power over a government who was tyrannical and pressing down upon their necks. Who, when they said yes to Jesus, their now marriage, their job, and their life was put in jeopardy. There was a fish outside the door so they could look and say, oh, there's Christians that gathered there. And it was that fish that reminded them the feeding of the 5,000. that when there was over 12 to 15,000 people, men, women, and children gathered, there was a young boy who had a small snack lunch with a few fishes and a couple of loaves. And the disciples came to Jesus and said, all these people are hungry. We need to send them away because we have nothing to offer them. And he says, why don't you grab that lunch and why don't you go and give it to them? And they're like, well, what do you mean? This is not going to feed everybody. He's like, go. Take the sack lunch and go. Jesus chose to do the work in which he was doing through the hands of people that had no idea what they were doing. All they did is had to just take the fish. They had to take the loaves, and as they walked around, imagine this, they would have been walking around with baskets, and they would be multiplying inside the small baskets in which they already had their hands. They would keep walking around thinking that it was going to run out, and every single time they looked down, there was more. 12 to 15,000 people were fed by some young boy's small sack lunch. You and I gather and live by this identification of a fish, that there is a God who is already doing a work, and he will continue to do a work. We are not doing anything new. We are continuing the work that he has already set out to do. May you and I be a people that take the small sack lunches and just walk out into the world believing that God is going to do something through his power, not through yours and I's. That is an imagination for a church who actually makes a difference in a city. As an imagination for when people hear Midtown in our city, they imagine a place that brings hope and goodness and peace and beauty, that can actually walk in hard times and say that there's something beyond this, that we can come in touch with our own grief and our own pain so that we can come in touch with the grief and pain of other people. I believe that there is more to come for you and I. But it's not in doing better or trying harder. It's in you and I actually submitting our lives, bowing down and praying, God, help. It's actually to surrender more and to know him more. You and I, to surrender our lives over and over again, to open up to a relational knowledge of a God who wants to move closer to you and I, to invite us in to grabbing the sack lunch and moving in his power and his hope to do more with our lives than you and I could ever do on our own. That is what we're doing when we celebrate 5 years. We are joining in a greater story. We are pressing in. So thankful for those who have had faith to say, I'll go to this thing. I'll go and I'll grab the sack lunch. I'll serve, I'll give, I'll pray, I'll care, I'll witness in our city. I'll invite. I'll continue to do this thing over and over again. When I don't feel like I have answers, what I do have is I have hope. And it's not hope in myself, it's hope in him. I don't have an ability to change anyone's mind or fix anyone's problem, but I do know that there's a power beyond mine that wants to heal and reconcile all things. And by that power, I can work into grace and forgiveness and mercy. I can do the things in which I otherwise could not do on my own. So why don't we stand together, and we're going to celebrate and mark today with a time of communion.